Welcome back to the Fireside Chat. Today we are going to discuss BRICS and the impact of Ukraine on BRICS and what does the future hold for BRICS. I have an excellent panel here. Ambassador Navdeep Suri, a diplomat of long standing and currently in ORF, heads in fact the BRICS direction. Victoria Panova, if I remember, has been associated with BRICS right from the very beginning. The very first academic forum which was held, Victoria was there as part of the Russian delegation. And Feodor Voitolovsky is the head of IMMO, the largest and probably the most prestigious think tank in Russia. And while he is a US expert, but he also understands Russian foreign policy and the importance of various multilateral bodies. So I don't think we could get a better panel than this. Let me start by going straight away to the big picture, Feodor. As the Indian Foreign Minister said yesterday, Ukraine was a shock to the whole world. I mean, in different ways, varying impact, but nevertheless a shock. BRICS is a body that incorporates Russia. It has China, India, Brazil, and South Africa. And it came about because these 5 countries, originally 4, felt that their voices were not heard on the international arena. And they felt that the 4 of them together will make a better impact in putting forth their agenda for change of the world that was built after 1945. Do you think Ukraine will derail this agenda?
I don't think so. First of all, thank you very much. It's great to be here at ORF, at Raisina again. I think that what we're seeing now is this so-called shock is the result that for 8 years the dominating Western media around the globe didn't want to see what is happening in Donbass. And the conflict started 8 years ago. It has started as a conflict inside Ukraine between Kiev and Donetsk and Lugansk. And a lot of people have been involved there from the beginning. But Russia's decision to use military force for this special operation, it has obvious roots in this conflict and in Russia's will to try to support civilians in Lugansk and Donetsk and try to support the self-proclaimed republics. From the beginning, Russia tried to get it into political diplomatic way, but unfortunately, all these opportunities have been lost. What we see now is an attempt of the West to use Ukraine as a proxy to fight against Russia.
So will that distract Russia from BRICS?
I don't think so, because with India, with China, with Brazil, we have very positive ties and very positive agenda, and we're trying to bring this alternative agenda not only for BRICS countries, but for more general international community. And these countries are making about 25 trillions of US dollars in their common GDP. It's a big and very fastly growing part of world economy. And in case we will try to find ways how we can convert our economic development, our bilateral ties into the multilateral agenda. We can bring to the international community in terms of fighting global problems, in terms of suggesting positive global agenda for others. In this sense, I think that BRICS has a lot of potential. Of course, on bilateral level, we have complicated relations, especially between India and China. But Russia is keeping very good ties with both of them and is trying to develop ties with Brazil and South Africa. In this sense, I think that we can rely on BRICS as a multilateral intergovernmental body which can give us opportunities for common suggestions on which can be valuable by many developing countries.
Thank you, Feodor. That is a very good sort of ending, which allows me to move directly to my next question to Victoria. Victoria, you've been at the academics forums from the very beginning. I remember us having discussions repeatedly. And we used to talk about the success of BRICS depending on a very focused agenda. So we used to talk about the NDB, we used to talk about currency reserve, we even talked about ratings and maybe creating even an alternate payment system. But subsequently, that's probably because I left BRICS, the agenda of BRICS has expanded. Today you have more than 100 initiatives, cryptocurrency to breast milk bank. It's got very diluted in my opinion, because if you look at it, since 2014, nothing has really of consequence has developed. And now Feodor is talking about potential. Yes, the potential is there. How do we convert this potential energy into kinetic energy? Do we need to reduce the number of initiatives?
Well, I would in a way disagree with their notion that you say that it's stalled. I would say yes, indeed, the number of initiatives have expanded vastly over the past years, but in a way, it's a positive sign, because what we see is that those different questions on the agenda, on some of them we're moving faster, on some of them we're kind of exploring rather each other's potential, each other's approaches, and somewhere we do stall. Of course, all the BRICS nations, they are not of their absolutely similar view on foreign policy, on economic policy, and definitely it is important for us to step by step go into some issues deeper, as we did with the NDB, for example. That's one issue. Of course, I would say we were talking about this framework agreement on their trade in national currencies. It's still there, but today, what is probably an opportunity of this crisis of West against Russia is that all the countries, not just Russia, had an opportunity to see how unreliable the West is, that just with their touch of fingers, it can stop, it forgets about all their freedom, democracy, their private property, about their international economic rules, and just steals, freezes other sovereign assets. So we already see other countries moving in the directions of having less reliance on dollar, on international reserves from the West. And this is probably a good sign for the BRICS, because each of the BRICS nations, they are sovereign, independent nations with global aspirations. Each of us, not necessarily having the same opinions between each other, we have our national agenda, and we are ready to promote it. And this national agenda, with the West still wanting to remain the status quo, they still want to be this golden billion without letting anybody in. So they will allow others to develop to a certain point until it's too dangerous. That is why, of course, it is very clear for other countries, BRICS included, that they have their sovereign agenda, and for example, financial system and payment system is one of the issues. So I hope this would allow to move faster in this regard. When we talk about national technology, science and technology architecture that was launched, it was institutionalized during BRICS Brazil presidency. Yes. This is also another very important point, because the West now is leading, and it's also not willing other countries to be coming too close in terms of technological development. So this is where BRICS can and should be moving forward, and I think this is another opportunity. It's in my mind, still slow, but probably this crisis would also expedite this process of convergence in those areas. And then, of course, humanitarian interaction, which we had you mentioned academic BRICS, but we had civil BRICS, we have business BRICS, including Women Business Alliance, right? We have a number of tracks where we launch a number of initiatives like Network University, BRICS Network University, where we do search for new areas of convergence and for new practical initiatives which could be put into benefits for all of our 5 countries. Actually, not just 5 countries. This is BRICS is beyond. BRICS is for the benefit not just 5, but of the developing world. So we are open for that, and that's what we are cooperating for.
Okay. Well, that's a very passionate plea for a future of BRICS. I will come back to you with some practical questions on that. But in the meantime, Ambassador Suri, you have been mostly outside the BRICS zone in your work, although you have also helped us with some of the BRICS work. To me, it appears that, and this is particularly sharp since 2015, that the convergence that BRICS had on a variety of issues, particularly, the agenda expanded from economic to geopolitical, that certain differences started cropping up between the 3 and the 2, and sometimes between 2. So yeah, the geopolitical statements have started becoming vaguer and vaguer. Do you think that now with another shock being brought about, do you, as an Indian participant, do you feel that the BRICS has a potential, or is it somewhat stalled?
Look, there's a reality and there's an aspiration. The aspiration might be to have this vibrant BRICS, which does geoeconomics and geopolitics and a lot of extensive development agenda. But the reality that it runs into is that the 3 largest members of BRICS are embroiled in one form of conflict or another. And I don't know how that impacts the other 2. But with Russia in a conflict and India and China being in the situation that they are, will, I believe, automatically put a plateau on the aspiration of what you can accomplish. But let me make a couple of points beyond that. I was moderating a panel last night on the sanctions post-Ukraine and the weaponization of the currency. And we had an extensive discussion about the collateral damage to a lot of countries being caused as a result of this. Each of the BRICS members abstained on the votes in the United Nations. But it is also clear when you read the explanation of votes and on the conversations that the external affairs ministers and others have been saying, that those abstentions shouldn't be seen as approvals. I think there's a deep discomfort amongst the other member states. I won't speak for China, and there have been enough indications coming from there, but certainly from Brazil and South Africa, and India definitely, that the new reality that has been created by the Ukraine conflict, by the Russian action, of a violation of territorial sovereignty of another country, creates a very uncomfortable situation for other member states, and it's something that we need to find ways to get over. I can argue against the sanctions, but it's one of those situations where 2 wrongs don't make a right. And I think that's where we find ourselves today in the context of Ukraine. The second point, I think, is the law of unintended consequences, where the conflict around the Black Sea and the impact on wheat exports from Russia and Ukraine have caused real issues for so many countries in Africa, elsewhere, who were dependent. I think Egypt was dependent for 90% of its requirements of wheat from the 2 countries. There's a conflict, there's sanctions, and the victims are somewhere else. And we don't today have ways to compensate those who become quote-unquote collateral damage as a result of somebody else's war. And the whole chain of events that you are seeing, disruption of supply chains, a rise in oil prices, if oil prices hit $120, it adds $70 billion to India's import bill. It raises the inflation rate, it creates problems for the fiscal policy, for our monetary policy. So even countries like India, which are large and relatively well managed, find themselves at the receiving end. So I think there are a lot of issues that we are coming up against because of this, and perhaps, you know, BRICS will have to be more modest in its aspirations until some of this dust settles down. That's what I feel, that there is going to be a mismatch between the aspiration with which it began as almost an alternate to the Western dominance and the reality that we find ourselves in today.
Thank you. I think that was a sobering summing up of where we are today, which leads to a question. And Feodor, I'm going to follow up with a question each, but I want very quick answers. What comes out of Ambassador Suri's summing up is one thing, that BRICS does not agree on this war, right? BRICS may not vote for or against one side or the other, but we do not agree on this war. And how does Russia, for example, intend to address this specific question with the other BRICS partners to imbue, as you said, a positive agenda to BRICS? Because unless you get this elephant out of the room, it's not going to happen.
Very interesting question, Nandan. I think that we need to find the logic of cooperation in BRICS, political cooperation, which will include the basic position that countries of BRICS are not always together, but never against each other. It's especially principle for India-China relations. It's sometimes principle for Russia-China relations, for other countries of BRICS. And in this logic, if we will try to include this logic into development of BRICS, sometimes we'll have divergent positions, but we will never give ground for anybody else outside to separate our countries economically, politically, and to make them, confronting each other. It's especially dangerous in terms of India-China relations, because a lot of Western powers, and especially the United States, are looking forward to engage India into deeper military political cooperation, to make it an ally, a military ally against China. There were a lot of Western people who were thinking that Russia can become a balancing power against China. But now we see what is happening with one of us. And it can happen with any other in case the Western community
I will interrupt you here because
disagree.
I get the broad gist of it. I will tell you right away that I don't necessarily agree with it. But I understand what you're putting forth. Victoria, quick answer, very quick. You were talking about a framework of trade in each other's currencies. India's trade with the combined West is closer to $500 billion. India's trade with all the BRICS together would be around 150, maybe 200 billion, right? If you take simple law of physics, the gravity is clear, right? Why would India want to de-dollarize?
Well, I would say this is to secure your interests so that not to be pressured. And when we talk about, okay, let's just take India as you mentioned.
No, but,
India with the rest
Victoria,
of the
I'll
world.
differ there again.
Yeah.
You're now sounding just like the United States. I know everything and I know your security interests even better than you. So I am telling you that this is to secure our interests.
This is not what I would like to say.
I'm being provocative.
So what I mean is that, first of all, one of the things we've been doing within BRICS, you remember we now already have the second economic strategy for BRICS. And our cooperation, we're still a huge underexplored potential of economic cooperation between each other. So probably we only have China as the biggest trade partner for each. But this is changing, and if you look at the dynamics over the past more than 10 years already, we've had this dynamics much more intensive within BRICS than between each of the countries of the BRICS and the outside world. So this has been the statistics. But we started with a quite low level. That's why we still have much bigger potential. We're not talking about de-dollarization as a whole, but we are talking about the possibility to secure each of us. So you can, of course, it's your sovereign choice to trade with who you want in the currency you want, but it would be probably cheaper, faster if we could have alternative schemes which would allow for trade, uninterrupted trade between all of
Victoria,
us
I'll have to
without
interrupt you
external
here.
dictate.
I'll have to
Yeah.
interrupt you here because I'm told we've run out of time. One thing is clear, I think, from the summing up and the ideas that the three of you have put, that BRICS definitely does have a potential, but in converting that potential into real life, there are still ahead many, many challenges. I can only hope that these 5 countries display the wisdom required to achieve their aspirations.
We will.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
think
you.
that was
Thank
an
you.
insightful discussion.
Thank you very much.